about with different challenges. And to tell us more about these challenges, I'm going to call upon General Mkhwanazi, the Provincial Commissioner of the Police Services, to tell us about the challenges that were brought about by these elections for the very first time. They almost challenged the outcome of the election, but because of the partnership that we have with many stakeholders, including the police, that type of eventuality was averted. So I'm going to ask General Mkhwanazi to come to the podium, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Program Director. The Premier, Amakosi, Ondabezita, the Provincial Executive, the leaders from different political parties, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to try and give the picture in terms of security that we are to handle as the cluster, the police with other security agencies together with other government departments that we're working together with during this election period. I prepared just a short presentation which is going to depict the situation that we had in our province. As we all know that we had a total number of 4,885 polling stations that we were given the responsibility to police as the South African Police Service. In all these polling stations, we can confirm that they were all opened, although others might have opened late, but they eventually all of them opened. A total number of voting stations that we had incidents on that we were more concerned about as a security cluster. We had a total of 104 of those voting stations where we had incidents, which ranges from service delivery protests that were happening in and around the voting stations. And we had criminal cases that we opened in regard to that. In some of the polling stations, there's a number of incidents that happened that required criminal cases to be opened. In total, we opened 40 criminal cases in relation to the day of the election. We had medical incidents also that took place, about 18 of them. And there's other conflict that we had to handle within those polling stations. So what the rest of the total of personnel that we deployed during these elections from the SAPS, we had 9,356 on the day of the election. And the total number from other agencies that supported us, which amounts to 51,058 personnel that we had on the ground. Of the 40 cases that I spoke about where we had to register cases in relation to the election, on the day we had reported we put out the breakdown in terms of the cases that we had. Some of them, there's new 2 ones that came this morning, which was the counter cases against the cases that were registered. So if a person say, you did this to me and I open a case against you, and the other one goes and counter that and open another case and say, but you're the one that did that to me. So issues such as assaults and so forth, they're also included on this list. That's why you see that the number then changed since this morning to 42 in total. We're indicating the status of those cases. 14 of them are in court, and total cases that are still with a senior public prosecutor is 2 of them, and the cases that have been finalized is 8. The 7 of the 8 where we declined to prosecute are the cases that will be registered or reported by different members of the community, where they will allege that they will have witnessed someone removing a poster from the lamppost and so forth, and when we investigate we don't find any evidence, and that person will not be able to give us a proof as to who did that. So as such, then that the case ordinarily would have been closed at the police station, but our approach this time around was that we'll still present it to the prosecution team, and the senior prosecutor will then decide whether to prosecute that case or not. So obviously lack of evidence will require that case be withdrawn. And one of those cases, somebody was found guilty and the person was expected to pay a fine of 2,000 rand or serve 2 months in prison. Up to this morning, that person had not yet paid the fine or is still behind bars as we speak. This is a total number of persons that we arrested in the province during the election day, and we've broken them down as 40 people, and we've broken it down to different status of all those that were arrested. One of them was found guilty, as I said earlier, and 24 of them are still in custody, meaning they are still in police cells. 2 of them were released as minors in terms of our laws in the country. Those, I must say, are some of those that get excited and be part of the crowd that are taking it to the street. As you know, the incident that happened at Utugela district, there were minors that were also involved that were released to the custody of their parents. And one of them, where the prosecution team felt that they can't prosecute, it was a minor who will have removed a poster of a political party and took it home. So somebody registered a case on that, which correctly so they're supposed to, but when we conducted the investigation, we discovered that it's a very young child who simply just take the poster and went and play with it. And unfortunately, we couldn't prosecute further on that. But those are some of the things that we had to deal with, unfortunately. So 4 of them are out on bail, and they still have to appear in court. And there are 4 of them that has been released on warning, and again they still have to appear in court, and the total number of them that also still have to come to court been reflected there. So this is basically just a breakdown. I don't want to bore you too much on it. It's a breakdown of each incident. So I might just say, like I said earlier, the total number of cases that we had on the day is not about those premier that has been making a lot of noise in the media. We included all of them. As you can see, the first one is about assault. Somebody assaulted someone during the election day, we register a case. The others that are preventing people from exercising their rights on election day by blocking them. You know the incident at Ntabamhlope. We opened cases because we arrested quite a number of people on that who are still going to court. In Tannhauser, that's what has been on the media a lot. We know of that incident where there were some officials that will have attempted, or some political members that will have attempted to commit crime by voting twice. Fortunately, due to a good working relationship with presiding officers in those voting stations, they were able to notice that there are people that seems to have appeared in those voting stations more in numbers than they're supposed to. And when they started checking their credentials, and they realized that people would have voted somewhere else, and they were taking their chance to come and cast the ballot for a second time. And they alert the police, and upon doing that, those people decided to run away, and we were able to arrest some of them in following days. So that's why we're having them in custody, and they are appearing in court. So it's a similar thing that happened also in Saoti. Bergville, we had quite a number of people who were arrested as a result of public violence, and it was covered a lot in the media. Gingindlovu, destroying the voting material, some of the cases that we had. So it's quite a list of them. I'm just indicating here of those where we effected arrest. In total, which, like I said, intimidation, defeating the end of justice, malicious damage to property, violating the Electoral Act, and so forth. So altogether, on 14 of those cases, we were able to effect arrests. So in conclusion, Program Director, I can safely say that all the incidents such as process actions, inter-party conflicts, which there were not much, criminal activities, social issues having impact on elections were swiftly dealt with by the security cluster. So the operations of the cluster will continue until the announcements of the results. We know it's going to happen today, hopefully, and we shall police those celebrations that are going to take place across the province. And we do hope that those that are going to be celebrating, they're going to do so responsibly, and we're going to assist each other to maintain the safe environment within the province. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Mkhwanazi. I am very happy to see that you underscore that the breaching of the Code of Conduct is prosecutable, and we are not paying lip service when we say that people who break the laws during elections can go to jail. So I'm hoping that political party leaders that are here are going to spread this message in communities and announce that the Code of Conduct is part of election legislation, and it has to be respected by supporters of parties. Now, SABC was one stakeholder that assisted in pulling through this election. Many government departments did the same. Otherwise, we would not have been able, as the Electoral Commission, to manage this election without the various government departments that came to the party. Now, to speak on behalf of all government departments, including COGTA, is the member of the Executive Council, MEC Nomusa Dube-Ncube, who I'm asking to come to the podium now. MEC Dube, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Program Director. Wish to acknowledge the presence of our Premier, Honorable Louis Mchunu, members of the Executive Council that are present here today. I wish to also acknowledge the members of the legislature, the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, the Acting Provincial Electoral Officer, Mrs. Ntomfuthi Masinga, our Commissioner General Mkhwanazi, leaders and members of the political parties, the leaders and members of the observer missions, the diplomatic corps, the IEC staff, the chairperson of the Provincial House of Traditional Leadership in KwaZulu-Natal, Inkosi Yasemadungeni, our security agencies and staff of all the spheres of government and members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, we stand here today as proud citizens of KwaZulu-Natal, as well as South Africa, to testify that once again democracy has triumphed in our country. Shortly, we will bear witness to the yet another watershed moment, occasion, when our Honorable Premier Willis Mchunu, on behalf of us all, will receive the results marking the culmination of elections that took place in our province and the rest of our country on the 8th of May. This moment makes us really proud that we have, in fact, been admired by the nations for delivering yet another free and fair and credible elections. And this is a reputation that as a nation we have come to really venerated by synonymous with the eyes of the international community that also witnessed the hard-working Independent Electoral Commission. Despite numerous challenges, numerous glitches, the election shown the strength and the resilience of our democracy. From our part, in the government, we salute and take our hats off the IEC team, which have substantially contributed to the evolution and the dynamic growth of the electoral democracy. The same goes to our government, led by our visionary leadership of our Honorable Premier and the Leader of Government Business, Honorable Zikalala, as well as our Premier Willis Mchunu, who, as the election process were announced by the IEC, assembled a team of the members of the executive to assist the IEC in ensuring that it delivers successful election. The provincial government played a pivotal role in supporting the IEC in ensuring elections run smoothly. For those of you who do not know that the role of the IEC is only to administer and run the election, and government has to ensure that there is infrastructure together with the relevant logistics and the resources so as to run the credible election. This ongoing support was provided with ourselves, COGTA, as the chairperson, which included the Department of Public Works, Transport, Community Safety and Liaising, Education, Health Department, Home Affairs, Public Works, Defense, Military Veterans, Police, municipalities, and many other departments that formed the Joint Operations Center that was working to ensure that the infrastructure is all ready for elections. As the government, we had to support all the 4,885 voting districts, including 115 temporary voting stations. Our support included, in the first place, establishing the infrastructure task team, a technical team that was led by the Director General, which conducted the needs analysis and provided the technical expertise that was needed. We also had to form the district task teams that met regularly and were closely monitored to deliver timelessly in all the requirements. Our deliverables included the temporary infrastructure, such as the tents, where there was none, ensuring that ESCOM power source for the tents, including the LED lighting for the ease of the voter and the counting process. We also had to ensure that all the voting stations had the connectivity. To this end, we worked very closely with ICASA and other cell phone network providers. In some instances, temporary infrastructure to improve the connectivity was installed. We have also needed to ensure that the voters exercise their right to secure, comfortable environment that had access to water, sanitation services, in which municipalities had done a sterling job. Through the Department of Transport and municipalities, access roads, including those that were damaged by floods, had to be attended to. And we are really grateful to all the teams that worked very hard against all odds to ensure that those roads, in particular in the south coast, as well as in the north coast, as well as in eThekwini, those roads that were inaccessible were accessible, including the last-minute intervention by the SANDF in ensuring that the bridge in Mtonjaneni was ready for people to be able to access the voting station, and we are grateful for all the teamwork that we saw being given by everybody. Our province recently underwent an unfortunate incident during which we lost several lives during the thunderstorms and heavy rains, which left over 70 people dead, as well as a lot of thousands of people that were displaced. This also included ensuring that our famous station, I think this is Mrs. Masinga's favorite station, uKovukeni. And other people, when we tell them in other provinces about Kovukeni, that we had that station is the only one in the country that has to close before 4 o'clock. Otherwise, the hippos will come and they will take over the space, and you won't be able to move out of that place if you don't move before 4 o'clock. And all these logistics, the IEC had to make sure that we work hand in glove to deliver the successful election. Home Affairs officers also played a pivotal role, working tirelessly even on the day of election, even with the displaced communities. They were able to open on a Saturday. Even on the 8th, they assisted a lot of displaced people to ensure that they had their ID document. We are also aware that IEC worked extended hours and on election day to ensure that everybody had their ID, and that millions of our citizens cast their votes in conducive and safe environment. And we really wish to thank all the government departments with the leadership of our Honorable Premier. We're also proud of the role that was played by the government in supporting the IEC so that they focus on their primary role of managing elections without having to worry about the other infrastructure. So we stand here full of confidence and pride that our government at all levels played their major role in ensuring the success of our elections and in ensuring that especially all the voting stations had the infrastructure that was required. As the curtain draws to a close on this election, ushering the 6th democratic administration, we do indeed wish to thank all the role players that ensured that we had all the hands on the deck. We also want to extend our gratitude to the Justice and Crime Prevention Security Cluster that is chaired by Honorable Kaunda for the sterling role they played in making sure that the elections were without any major disturbances. And indeed, General Mkwanazi, as well as the Minister Kele, all were there to ensure that they support in all the work that needed to be done. I know that we even had meetings on the 7th, on the 8th, ensuring that everything really was put in its place for our people to exercise their role. It was the responsibility of government to ensure that elections were held in conditions of peace and stability without any intimidation of both voters and the IEC staff. It is our view that there is no issues that cannot be resolved peacefully through talking and negotiations. We celebrate that effort to exercising the rights that nobody's rights were thwarted. Indeed, no amount of dissatisfaction should be used to justify interference with our citizens' constitutional right to vote. We also wish to express our appreciation to the leaders of political parties for their exemplary behavior throughout the campaign and the campaign period. The elections to date and all parties demonstrated leadership and maturity, and they followed all the rules and the prescript of the Electoral Code, of which they all subscribed ahead of the elections. We do wish to congratulate all the political leaders in KwaZulu-Natal for doing everything in their power to maintain a positive image of our province. During the past 3 days, we all put our differences aside and allowed peace and space for voters to exercise their democratic role. Now the people have spoken. It is the time to take off our campaigning gear and to work together across political lines in the 6th legislature of KwaZulu-Natal to fight the triple challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality, and grow our South Africa together. Indeed, to the IEC, Mrs. Masinga and your team, and Mr. Mosari, who had to shuttle between national and the province, and to you, Mrs. Masinga, and your team, who had to hold forth, despite the fact that we had such a large number of political parties that were contesting. It is this time for us to say we send the servants of the people to deliver new, innovative, and creative ways to solve the problems that are faced by our people. This is not going to be an easy task. However, it is not also going to be an impossible task. We really want to say on behalf of the Committee of Infrastructure, as well as the team of the JCPS cluster, we do wish to thank all the MECs for their hard work and commitments that they put, indeed led by our Honorable Premier, Willis Mkhunu, and our Leader of Government Business, Honorable Zika Lala, and the rest of our official led by the DG, Mrs. DG Mkhize, who ensured that she rallies the team even on the 8th to ensure that we indeed, as a government, we play our role. Let us work together to grow our South Africa. Well, thank you very much once more.
Thank you, MEC Dube. Can we give her another big hand, please? Thank you very much. Thank you for those very encouraging words. And we really could not have done it without the help of government. And we thank you for reminding us that elections are by nature a massive logistical project. We, as the Electoral Commission in KZN, are the envy of all our colleagues in provinces. They often ask us, how do we manage to do this? How do we manage to forge such a formidable partnership with government and be able to deliver the type of election that we do? So thank you so much. We pay tribute to our provincial government and its leadership, as well as the Electoral Commission. And we also remind us that it takes a whole lot of hands behind the scenes to pull together this national duty. So I am glad that you are able to bring all these aspects together to remind us that we are one nation, and therefore we need to work together to show the pride that we have, and also to make sure that our democracy is sustained and it grows even stronger, despite the challenges that we might be facing here and there. So thank you so much for that very moving, I'm going to call it keynote address. Before we proceed, I want us to just try and marinate on what we've just heard and ask the band to perform. Just give us one item, and then we will proceed to get the results. MEC Dube said the people have spoken, so after the performance, we will hear exactly what the people said. So I will hand over to the band to give us a performance, and then we'll take it up from there.
No pressure at all.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. morning found a letter that she wrote. She said she's tired that I'm always on the road. Too much to swallow, being alone. She needs someone more that she can call. She must have told me 1,000 times more. Silent cries I used to ignore. God knows I love her. Leave to her. Maybe I'll be sitting here waiting on you to come home again. I'll be, promise I'll be here till the way.
All right, well, I'm assuming that's some spiritual music there, which some of those political parties might be needing more than others, I suppose. All right, I'm Flo Ledwaba. I'm with you. I've taken over from Desiree. I'm sure she needs a good break at this point. Still with me in the studio, though, is Ntate Terry Zelani, who is the executive chairman of IMSA. He's still with us, helping us to analyze those results that are coming in. You know that we're almost done with the counting here, sitting at 99.9% of those votes counted so far already. So I think today we'll know officially what's going on. We just came out of the Durban IEC there. We'll go back as well just to get a final assessment of the results coming out of KZN there. And of course, a comfortable win there for the ANC. I'd like to bring in as well Kaya Sitole, who's a political analyst. He's joining us via Skype. He'll also be chatting to us about those results coming in. I'm going to start with you, actually, Kaya. I think it's always interesting for me to ask a political analyst if anything actually surprised you. I mean, you saw that there was a lot of fanfare around the FF Plus getting numbers that I suppose a lot of people weren't expecting them to get. Were you perhaps surprised by that? And what else possibly surprised you coming out of these results so far?
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to the listeners. And I think for me, obviously, the Freedom Front Plus was the big surprise of this electoral cycle. But beyond just the Freedom Front Plus, I'm still very intrigued about not only just the poor turnout throughout the country, but also the very, very poor performance of the African National Congress in KZN, because, of course, that is supposed to be one of their strongholds where they literally simply have to put up a tent and people do show up and vote, and then they give them the type of momentum that then translates into a very good majority at the National Assembly. And I think this year what we've seen is that there's been a very low turnout, and that low turnout has then translated into a reduced majority for the ANC in KZN, and this is obviously translating onto a reduced majority to the National Assembly at large. So
Kaya,
for me, those are the big surprises, the performance of
What do you attribute this low voter turnout to, especially that of the youth? There was quite a bit of concern about the fact that the youth just weren't rocking up to the polls this time around. Is there a sort of disinterest? Is there sort of just, not worried about where we're going in terms of politics, or just sort of what happens? What really can we attribute to the fact that the youth just didn't sort of show up this time around?
So for me, the young people of the country are actually a subset of the society at large. And there's been a poor turnout throughout the country at large. Society is, for one reason or another, no longer identifying, the 5-year electoral cycle as the one thing where everybody needs to go and participate. So we've got a bigger problem where seriously a lot of people are not showing up to the vote. And of course, the young people themselves, being a subset of society, they are not going to essentially be very different to what society is reflecting. So I think that's what the bigger problem is. But I think also what we need to be able to try and figure out is, long before we have an election date, what are the particular processes that need to be really amplified in order for us to have a very good turnout? And for me, the registration process, where you're still seeing a lot of young people not even registering in the first place, simply means that the lower the registration participation, the lower the eventual turnout is going to be. Yeah. And I think if we could at least achieve some form of universal registration, particularly for young people, then we'll be able to get as many of them to the ballot box on the day as possible. But I think in these instances, there are far too many bureaucratic processes that for young people just simply do not make sense, simply because of the way that they interact with the state and society at large. And until we find a way to figure out how to engage young people and do things in a way that appeals and is accessible and has a proximity towards them, it's actually going to get worse.
All right. Kaya, I'm going to stop with the analysis for a moment there. I understand that we are crossing back then to Durban. There is some sort of an announcement going on there about the results. So let's go back then to Durban. Just take a look what's happening there. Am I understanding correctly that we'll be crossing to Durban? All right, let's check the results then instead. Let's take a look at where the results are sitting at the moment. Let's help you there. Take a look at your screen. It should be popping up at any moment now. But Tate Terry, in terms of KZN, I mean, you heard Kaya there talking about the fact that this low voter turnout sort of harmed the ruling party. There was also the question of whether, Jacob Zuma, the former president, might have also harmed the prospects of the ANC in KZN. What are your views? It does seem, though, still that the ANC was quite comfortable there. We're sitting there with 54.2%. What are your thoughts on KZN?
Well, when you look at the results, it is clear that the ANC is in a decline, and that the beneficiaries have actually been more the IFP as well as the EFF. So it is clear that perhaps some of the supporters may have gone to the IFP, and others may have gone to join the EFF. That's why the numbers look the way they are.
Yeah. Should the IFP be happy with that 16.3? I mean, KZN is probably the one province where they really have that sort of hold, I suppose. Should they be happy with that 16.3 at the moment in KZN? I
mean, it's a major improvement compared to the results of the last election.
Yeah.
So they are now the official opposition, and they should be happy with the fact that they have done well and improve on their last results.
All right, let's take a look at the seat allocation there. Should be popping up on the screen at any moment now. Right, so when we look at the KwaZulu-Natal legislature, 83 seats up for grabs there. Of course, these are predictions with 100% of those VDs counted at this point. The ANC with 44 of those seats, IFP 14, DA 11, EFF 8, and NFP coming in at 1. Interestingly, that the NFP is there. That doesn't surprise you very much. What do you think of that? One seat to the NFP?
Well, NFP has had difficulties since the last election.
Right.
As you remember that they did not even qualify to participate in the 2016 local government elections. And I think the fact that they did not have representation in local councils has had an effect. But also I think because of the fact that the leader of NFP has not been that well. They went into this campaign without really having a face, of their campaign.
Right.
And therefore, that may have worked to their detriment.
We're sitting there with the ANC, and I mean, I've said this before, that they seem to still be strong, though, in KZN, but you are talking about the fact that the numbers are declining. So what factor really is the biggest factor in terms of ANC sort of declining in KZN, do you think is the most significant that I'm sure the ANC has to sit back and then sort of reflect on afterwards?
I mean, the number itself, it's a very important indication that there is a problem.
Yeah.
And therefore, I'm sure they will have to sit down and reflect and try to identify factors that could have led to the decline and try to see how they can improve on their performance.
All right, let's bring back Kaya to the discussion. Kaya, we're sitting here with the KwaZulu-Natal results, and we're talking about what could have affected them at this point. You've taken a look at those KwaZulu-Natal results. Can I just ask the team to put up the national results there for us, please, so that we can discuss it with Kaya as well. Kaya, just a question to you in terms of your thoughts where the results are with KZN. I mean, it does seem that the ANC is still strong there in KwaZulu-Natal. But not as strong as they would like to be. What do you think is the biggest issue here? You see they are sitting at 57.8%. For any other party, that's brilliant. But I suppose for the ANC, where they've had higher numbers before, it's not that great. What do you say about this, Kaya?
I think for me, the key issue that the ANC needs to start interrogating is whether the further away we get from the pre-1994 dispensation and the more the electorate becomes really infused by people who were born long after 1994 who don't have a real, experience of apartheid is. the question that we should be addressing is what is the ANC's growth strategy? And I think what has happened historically is that we've always been looking at the other parties to formulate a growth strategy to penetrate the voting market while the electorate, and then say to them, this is what we're selling, this is why it's better than the ANC. But even the ANC itself probably enjoyed the goodwill of really being the liberation movement for at least the first 4 or 5 electoral cycles. And of course, as the electorate evolves and people no longer see that as the primary interaction point with politics, the ANC needs to then come out and say, this is actually the value proposition that we're putting out here. And I think they've struggled with that, not because they haven't tried, but because they haven't actually realized now it is actually now the time to repurpose the party, not just as a liberation movement, but as a governing party that actually wants to get a renewed mandate. And I think for now, the ANC has actually never realized that at some point in time, you actually need to break away from the past and be a more future-focused party. So when you look at parties like the EFF themselves, they look into the constituency that is probably most aggrieved and is probably most disaffected with the current status quo, and then ask the question, what speaks and what appeals to that constituency, and let us talk about these things. So I think the KZN decline is probably going to hit the ANC very hard, because it is probably, if the ANC had said about 3 or 4 months ago, these are where we think our weak spots are, there's no way KZN would have featured as a weak spot, because they simply believe, and a lot of people still believe, that it was sort of a safe seat for them, if you want to call it that. So of course now the fact that the electorate is showing them that actually it's no longer a safer space, we are no longer as convinced, we are no longer as attached to the ANC as we've been for the first 4 or 5 electoral cycles. What are you bringing to us? And the ANC has struggled to articulate that message. I think also obviously the question of Jacob Zuma, you cannot deny that of all the politicians we have in the country, only he and Julius Malema have got this wonderful ability to be as charismatic and as, appealing to an electorate as to convince people to actually say, let me go and vote, if not for the party that this man represents, but just for the fact that he said I must vote for the party. So I think the ANC really struggled in trying to identify the role that they wanted Jacob Zuma in particular to play in this particular electoral campaign. Now, of course, the very essence of what the ANC has done over the past 18 months is to simply say that everything that has gone wrong was a Zuma problem. We're trying to distance ourselves from him. But of course, at the grassroots level, that type of conversation and that type of communication is not as sophisticated or is not as well narrated as the ANC thought it was. So if people are still asking at the grassroots level, what exactly did he do that warranted him being ejected from office? And the ANC struggles to answer that question. And then the ANC then has people who don't have the same capacity or the same charisma to be able to simply speak and charm the voters and say, give us another opportunity. It simply meant that they were shooting themselves in the foot, not just by ejecting from office, but by not coming up with a strategy of saying, how does this man still capitalize on the type of political capital, the social capital that he has with a particular electorate in KZN, and then assist us with the next election, with the 2019 elections. So I think that was their big weakness, and unfortunately, until they find a way to deal with that problem, KZN is probably going to look like suddenly a problem when it is supposed to be as safe a seat as Limpopo and the Eastern Cape are.
All right, we've seen those T-shirts, and funny enough, you mentioned that those T-shirts, Uzuma Wenzeni, a lot of those T-shirts I've been seeing all over social media. But do you think that the ANC will actually see this as some sort of a wake-up call? I mean, you can see the ANC is already celebrating. They're in a celebratory mood. For them, it's a case of, well, we've won again. But do you think there will be a time where they go, actually, now it's time for the work, it's time to get back those voters who perhaps had not voted for us, or those who just actually simply decided not to vote? Do you think that they will take this time to sort of reflect as we go to the, possibly the next elections?
I mean, the reality is that the ANC has lost about 3 million voters over the past 5 electoral cycles. If you look at perhaps their performance in 1999, where they had about 12 million people that voted for them, we are now just bordering on just around 10 million votes that are voting for the ANC. The first question that the ANC needs to engage on is, how do we lose not just 1, but more than 2 million voters when we still believe that the things that we are doing are in the best interest of the electorate? So that's the first question that they need to deal with. And the reason I said that this is a big issue is that obviously with every electoral cycle, the electorate grows. So the number of people that are able and qualified to participate in the election grows much further. So of course, if the ANC is seeing a decline in the absolute numbers of people that are voting for us, it then has to ask itself the question, are we still seen by society as the type of party, as the type of structure that actually champions the interests of society? And quite literally the answer is that they are no longer being seen like with that. So they need to then take a step back and reflect and say, how did we end up in this particular situation? We all know how they ended up here. The ANC really suffered from the sins of incumbency. The sins of incumbency dictate that for as long as you feel that you've got this massive winning majority.
Let me interrupt you, Kaya. Let me interrupt you, Kaya, slightly. Apologies for that, Kaya. Let's cross over to the IEC. You see those visuals there of the ANC leadership in Pretoria at the ROC, where they are in celebratory mood about the results, the Gauteng results. You can see those visuals there. Sure. And we're going to get an announcement shortly. You can see there, Jesse Duarte. They all seem very happy. They are announcing at the moment. Let's cross over then.
Are you leaving? Yeah. Okay.